An Indiana mom called 911 for a little girl's seizure, but police say that call was a cover story. They allege her 7-year-old stepdaughter was the victim of a brutal, days-long beating, one so violent it allegedly involved a hammer, and it ended in catastrophic brain damage. And they say the child's dad watched it all happen. Now we're going inside this shocking court case where documents show that not only does this girl have damage that could end her life, but her dad and her stepmom have allegedly even confessed to the violence. And just wait until I tell you what they said. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Stewart. Hey, before we get into this episode of On the Case, one of the most watched shows on YouTube, I need to talk about our partner and sponsor, Morgan & Morgan, America's largest personal injury law firm. They have more than 1,000 attorneys who have recovered $25 billion from more than 500,000 clients. In the past few months alone, a client in Florida received $12 million when insurance offered just $350,000. In Pennsylvania, another client was awarded $26 million. That's 40 times the insurer's offer. Morgan & Morgan makes it easy to fight for what you deserve. You can even start a claim from your phone. So if you're injured, you can start a claim at forthepeople.com/OTC. You can also click below or scan the QR code on our screen. A stepmom called 911. She claimed that her 7-year-old daughter was having a seizure. But when help arrived, they found a little girl covered in bruises, and that little girl was unresponsive. I will warn you, this story is so difficult to talk about, and it is just so disturbing that a stepmom and a dad would be accused of this, and they have allegedly confessed, and we'll get into that part in just a moment. But the stepmom and the girl's dad are behind bars as we speak, and they are accused at this point of a pattern of abuse that left the child with severe brain damage. And the most heartbreaking part of it is doctors are not expecting that little girl to survive. We have the shocking probable cause affidavit, and inside, police say the stepmom admits that she flew into a rage, confessing to things like beating the child with a hammer. Even worse, the dad, according to police, admits that he saw it all happening, but he did nothing to stop it. But what's inside this document, if you can imagine, it gets even worse than that. So here's what this case is really all about, based on the narrative from police and the allegations that we're reading in court records. So it's Tuesday, December 2nd. The story takes place in Hartford City, Indiana. It's a little after 3:30 in the afternoon when that 911 call comes in from a home on West Commercial Street. A 7-year-old girl is unresponsive. When first responders arrive, they find the girl's stepmom, 33-year-old Jennifer Revis. And according to the police report, Jennifer's initial story was that an argument led to a dog bite. And then the girl had a seizure. But officials immediately saw something was terribly wrong. Police say a firefighter pointed out that the girl had bruises all over her body. She was rushed to the hospital. What doctors found there, according to this affidavit, changed everything. They reported, quote, significant brain damage and bruises across the child's entire body. The medical assessment, as relayed by police, was that the injuries were not accidental. Doctors told investigators that the girl was not expected to survive. That discovery, it launched a massive investigation. Police interviewed the parents separately, and according to the probable cause affidavit, their stories began to unravel, revealing a timeline of alleged abuse in the days leading up to that 911 call and a disturbing portrait of a home where both adults are now accused of failing this child. The document alleges the abuse escalated in the week before that girl was hospitalized. It details specific brutal incidents that police say the parents described, from slapping and shoving to an alleged hammer attack on her feet and her hands. This girl, who we are not naming because she still is alive at the time of this recording, she's just 7 years old. Think about that, just 7. Now, police also say that the father gave a damning account of his own, that he allegedly admitted to investigators that he saw the girl's injuries and her fear, but he chose not to intervene because he was afraid of a confrontation and of losing his other children. How cowardly is that, if all of this is true? Now, it all culminated, police say, in a violent final altercation that happened on Tuesday. The stepmom, Jennifer Revis, allegedly admitted to smacking the girl in the head so hard she described it as a 7 out of 10, which was followed by the grabbing and yelling that led to the 911 call. Now, based on these alleged actions and confessions detailed in the affidavit, Here are the serious felony charges that both parents now face. Jennifer Revis, the stepmom, is looking at neglect of a dependent resulting in catastrophic injury, neglect of a dependent resulting in serious injury, aggravated battery, posing a substantial risk of death, domestic battery with serious bodily injury to a person under the age of 14, domestic battery by means of a deadly weapon. Ryan Revis, the dad of this girl who says he just did nothing to stop this, he is charged with neglect of a dependent resulting in catastrophic injury. So let's take a closer look at what authorities are laying out, the specifics of this case that it appears prosecutors will have to work with. So the probable cause affidavit lays out the investigation minute by minute, interview by interview, and it begins with the scene that first responders walked into on December 2nd. One officer described what he saw when he entered the child's bedroom, saying, quote, I entered a bedroom to the west of the kitchen area and observed EMS personnel treating victim 1. Victim 1 was laying on her back on a bed. I observed that victim 1 had bruising all over her face with a specific dark bruise in the area of her left eye. Victim 1 was unresponsive at this time. But the true gravity of the situation became clear at the hospital. The lieutenant wrote about the assessment that he received from the examining physician, Dr. Caroline Yang, and it says, quote, she informed me that victim 1's injuries were very severe, noting she had significant brain damage. She believed victim 1 would not survive due to the extent of her injuries. Now, she confirmed the injuries were not consistent with the story provided by Jennifer to EMS or myself that were consistent with non-accidental injury. With that diagnosis, the parents were brought in for questioning. Their separate interviews, detailed over dozens of pages, form the backbone of this case. Ryan Revis, the girl's dad, was interviewed first. And according to the affidavit, he described a home where punishment was near daily, and he was willfully blind to it. He allegedly told police, quote, Ryan admitted that he overlooked signs of escalating abuse due to fear of confrontation and fear of losing his twins. It makes me so angry reading this story and seeing what this dad allegedly told police. He allegedly admitted to knowing Jennifer was hitting the girl, saying he convinced himself it wasn't severe because he, quote, didn't want to blow up his marriage. Now, when confronted with the life-threatening nature of the injuries, according to the document, he said he didn't realize the abuse was life-threatening and he became emotional. In her interviews, Jennifer Revis's alleged confessions began to reveal a much more violent picture. She reportedly admitted to an escalating pattern of abuse in the days before the 911 call. Now, this includes her account of what happened that Sunday, November 30th. Officers write that Jennifer stated unprompted, quote, I did beat the S word out of her 2 days ago. She allegedly described slapping the girl in the face multiple times, then, quote, grabbed victim 1 by the back of the neck and forcefully shoved her through a doorway, causing victim 1's face to strike a wall. Victim 1 fell to the floor after hitting the wall. She also said that she told the girl to get out and the child waited on the front porch until Ryan came home. But the alleged abuse escalated further the very next day, Monday, December 1st, in a later interview. Jennifer gave detectives a detailed account of an incident involving a hammer. Officer's narrative states, quote, Jennifer admitted to striking victim 1 with a hammer on the feet and hand during an incident on Monday, December 1st, 2025. Jennifer was in victim 1's room arguing with her, and she became upset that victim 1 would not answer her questions. This girl is 7, by the way. One of the younger brothers carried a screwdriver and a hammer into the room. So she has younger kids carrying tools into the room that she would allegedly use to beat a 7-year-old. Jennifer described that she let her, quote, intrusive thoughts win. She took the hammer and began striking the wall. She then struck the rail on the end of the bed, causing damage. While hitting the bed rail, victim 1's feet were near the rail, so she began striking victim 1's feet as well. Victim 1 attempted to protect her feet with her hand, and Jennifer struck her hand as well. Now, when a detective asked if hitting her with the hammer was a good solution, her alleged response was that it was the meanest thing she'd ever done to the girl. The violence allegedly culminated on Tuesday, December 2nd. That's the day of the 911 call. Jennifer described to detectives the moment just before the girl became unresponsive. The affidavit states, quote, Jennifer smacked victim 1 in the right side of her head with an open right hand. Jennifer was asked how hard she struck the victim, and she said the hit was hard, describing the force as a 7 out of 10 on a scale of 1 to 10. Now, armed with Jennifer's detailed accounts, investigators went back to Ryan Revis, the dad who says he just was so scared of his wife that he was going to stand by the side and let his wife beat his daughter allegedly. Ryan Revis, his story, according to the affidavit, then changed in his second interview. Initially, he described only giving the girl a spanking when he found her outside on Sunday, but when confronted with Jennifer's version, he allegedly admitted to more. Police write, quote, Ryan acknowledged that he shoved her a little, but denied shoving her into anything or causing her to fall. He clarified that he pushed her from the doorway area into the hallway, but did not push her all the way into the bedroom. When confronted directly with Jennifer's statement that he picked up victim 1 and threw her into the bedroom, Ryan firmly denied that ever occurred. He did admit that victim 1 screamed when he picked her up, that he spanked her, and that he shoved her toward the hallway, but he insisted he never threw her. As for the alleged hammer attack, Ryan claimed that Jennifer never told him the full details, saying if he had known, he would have stopped her. But the affidavit does say that he confessed to hitting the child in recent weeks, and more specifically, the officer writes, quote, Ryan also acknowledged placing his hands on victim 1 in a manner he had not previously disclosed. He described grabbing her by both shoulders, yelling at her, and maybe shaking her a little bit. The detective stated that this abuse, to which Ryan responded, quote, I know that's abuse. Joining us now to talk a little bit more about this case and where it could go from here is Krista Ramey, trial attorney. Thank you as always for being with us on Law and Crime and helping us unpack some of these really just disturbing stories. And certainly this is a case of that out of Indiana. In this situation, you have the stepmom and the dad, and they both to some extent have confessed, according to the court documents that we have. In that situation, what happens now? As prosecutors are building their case?
Well, I mean, the confession is, a great step, obviously. And if everything was done appropriately in terms of any kind of, Miranda warnings that were given and were they in custody or not when they separated them initially, I think, and began to talk to them, that will depend upon whether or not those statements become admissible later in a trial. So sometimes there are confessions that if, I don't have any evidence that I saw in this case that anything was done inappropriately, but the child was unresponsive. And when they got there, and the police appropriately separated the two adults and spoke to them separately, and were able to get the information that way. And I think that was the right way to do it. At that point, when you come in and there's an unresponsive child, you don't need to immediately Mirandize in order to begin questioning of witnesses that are on scene, because a lot of this you're doing to save the life of the child, right? It's exigent type circumstances. So that is, the great first step that prosecutors have so they can begin investigating the crime based upon what they know. And so they have more of a focused investigation now. And it looks like that there's probably some history of abuse in this household with both the stepmom and the father. And
Jennifer Revis, the stepmom, and then Ryan Revis is the biological father of this 7-year-old girl. They are facing serious charges. Jennifer a lot more than Ryan is, but a real sad part of this case is as we're recording this girl is still alive, but doctors have reportedly said that they do not believe that she is going to survive this. Knowing that they're facing these serious charges, but this could become a murder investigation, at some point. I guess what happens between the prosecutors and the defense is it kind of just this holding pattern, trying to figure out what more could come in this case if this girl does pass away.
Yeah, so what they're doing right now is, the investigation really is the same in essence. They're not really going to have to look for or get any kind of different information. Right now, they're looking at, 20 to 40 years, felony, level 1 felony. This is a big deal. Not that there's ordinary abuse, but this was extraordinary circumstances with a hammer to the head. This child is poor baby, 7 years old. So this is very serious as it is. And what happens, if she dies, then that changes from, the endangerment and battery charges to the homicide charges. I think that at this point, you can proceed with one and then go with the other, but you don't want to do that. You want to have everything in. So they're watching this child closely right now so they can amend any criminal information that they already have on file, ready to go with the courts to make sure that they can hit the ground running with the ultimate charges that they will be going for, which is murder.
And when we were talking about the alleged confessions at this point, I could kind of see like the idea of like a defense attorney is going to look and be like, was this a legit confession? You know, is there something that we can raise if you're one of the defense attorneys on this? It's obviously important to have the medical records, and they tell a terrible story. How important is that to have that kind of scientific evidence that, hey, this is what happened to this little girl, to go along with that confession, instead of just having that confession, which could be incredibly damning, but something that defense attorneys could point to and try and pick apart?
Yeah, so you have, the mom, I guess, also said that the girl had a seizure and was bit by the dog or something. So she kind of threw out there some maybe alternative causes when she was talking to the police. It's important. It's also, the prosecutor's job to prove every element of the case beyond a reasonable doubt. So any injury or death must have been a result of the abuse. And in order to get to that point, you have to have the medical evidence to get that medical causation to tie that to the crime of the physical assault. So what were the damages? Brain damage right now, potentially death, unfortunately, and having those medical records are critical. And I think that that's what the doctors saw once that she went into the hospital. They were like, wait, there's something a lot more serious here. This is not a dog bite and a seizure. This is something much more horrible.
Yeah, and to just think that story, if all of this is true, what police are saying, that this stepmom thought that story was going to hold up is just, it's ridiculous. Reading through this police document, you just like find this level of anger, especially to the dad as well, because he just allowed this, according to police, to just take place in the home. It just, publicly you look at it, he seems incredibly weak as a person. For prosecutors, when you see him and you just see what he was telling them, it seems like whatever story he was telling cracked as soon as he found out that his wife was giving a confession. How does he factor into if, as far as I think prosecutors, how they might strategize in seeing that he gets prison time, but then at the same time, how effective he could be as a witness in putting away the stepmom?
Yeah, so I believe that I read also that he himself confessed to have hit the child previously. It looks like that there has been a long-term pattern of abuse potentially with this child. And so with that, you could potentially have accessory type charges or conspiracy charges. They could be charged together for the murder of this baby if she dies. And so it's very serious for him. He's not just watching his wife do this. He is, allowing it to happen in his presence. This is his biological child. And he has also done this himself in the past. So it's a bit different than, a bystander, watching a car accident and not stop and giving aid. It's a little different than something like that, where bystanders ordinarily don't have a duty to act. Here, the biological father has a duty, and he is allowing something to happen in his presence that is putting his child in danger, and that is directly causing harm to his child, and also what he has done in the past as well.
How does that work as far as, sadly, if we are talking about a murder investigation, if it was the stepmom who allegedly did the abuse that took the life of this girl, how does the law see it where you have this biological dad in the home who says he may have witnessed something, that he allowed something to happen, that he would also be charged? I mean, how likely would it be that he could face a murder charge even though he wasn't the person who might have delivered the blow that took this girl's life?
I think it's highly likely. You allege it as, in essence, a conspiracy. He's not just allowing it to happen. He is, in essence, at this point, participating in the abuse by it, occurring and then reoccurring in his presence. He himself has admitted that he has also hit the child in the past. So you have, kind of something. This abuse is not just one discrete moment in time. It's a systemic thing that is happening over time in this household, it sounds like. So that's what you're building on as a prosecutor, as a history of, and everything that has led up to this very moment. And it's not just this one day where something happened. It is many days that this has happened.
How do you prove, clearly they have the evidence, and it seemed like from the police report that they were talking within a week, that there was injuries, that it wasn't just December 2nd when the 911 call came in, but it seemed like there was, at least within a week of time, there was what police say alleged abuse of this child. But there also seems to be that this could not have been just 1 week they decided that this is what they were going to do, that this built up over time. How do you prove, how do prosecutors or police be able to go back and get a comprehensive picture of the amount of the amount of abuse that this girl went through if it was more than just 1 week.
So they're looking at, there's probably evidence within the house itself that shows signs of abuse. Sadly, we've had stories that, in the past where, kids were locked up in closets. And I remember this one case in Michigan where, the refrigerator was locked up where he couldn't get food. So you'll see just within the house itself the patterns of abuse, but you will also see on the child's body. So what doctors may have been able to see, initially over the last week, you will be able to see over time on a child's body when you're looking at, unfortunately, a body on autopsy. You'll be able to find even a lot more, particularly with MRIs and brain scans. You can, look at the gray matter in the brain and see evidence of abuse over time to the child's head trauma. So maybe fractures that have healed. There's going to be a lot of evidence on that child's body.
Looking at the charges that Jennifer Revis is facing, she has a charge of domestic battery, but she's also facing an aggravated battery charge. What is the difference between the two?
Well, the aggravated is because of the use of the weapon, the blows to the head, because of the intentionality and the severity of what was done. This is not just, I spanked my child too hard. Or, in a moment of rage, I shook my baby. This is much more serious. And so that's the difference between the aggravation.
And looking at the charges that Jennifer is facing, neglect of dependent resulting in catastrophic injury, neglect of dependent resulting in serious injury, aggravated battery, like we just talked about, and domestic battery. There's actually domestic battery of serious bodily injury to a person under 14, then domestic battery by means of a deadly weapon, which would be the hammer. Ryan Revis is only facing neglect of a dependent resulting in catastrophic injury, yet he seems to have admitted to some sort of abuse along the way. Would you expect that he could face more charges? I mean, certainly if this ends up being a murder investigation, but what goes into, it seems like there's a lot more here of Jennifer physically doing the abuse, but then on the flip side of it, I mean, he's in the house, he sees all of it, and he admitted at least a little bit that there was some physical abuse that he was responsible for too.
Yeah, so the neglect charge, they're not charging him, I don't think, with a battery yet. And I think that is because there was no battery really that they were investigating in that moment. He did confess to it, by the way, a battery, so I don't know the reasoning behind it. A lot of times prosecutors are cautious about what charges they do. A lot of prosecutors we've seen be very aggressive in how they prosecute and maybe overcharge. I think that, this father was appropriately charged in terms of the aggravated neglect charges that he's facing. I don't know if it was necessarily called aggravated neglect, but the neglect resulting in a catastrophic injury is what I think it is that he has or is facing. And that, that's a level 1 felony. That's a very serious charge. You don't have to have multiple charges. One charge is enough. If they prove that, if they have multiple charges, he's still going to be doing the same time. Under most circumstances, sentences run concurrently, not consecutively. So I don't know really if it makes much of a difference, but the best evidence is for this particular one because you have neglect over time resulting in the catastrophic injury that this child has now.
And based off of what prosecutors and police believe they have, that there are doctors who say just the story doesn't add up about the seizure and the dog, and then they're going to have the interrogation video where Jennifer Revis says something along the lines of, I beat the bleep out of her, and then she talks about hitting this girl as a 7 out of 10 on an impact, this is a 7-year-old girl. If all of that was legally obtained, what does the defense look like for her going forward?
I mean, the defense should be, try to get a plea deal with the prosecutor. I don't know that, I think that what she has is rage and serious rage. She, I think, also said something along the lines, I'm an adult, I should know better. But she humiliated me or was did something that, but she couldn't articulate exactly what it was that the child did that was so bad that was worthy of that kind of reaction. I think that you're trying to look for maybe some evidence of some kind of heat of passion type of defense maybe that would mitigate. But I think that that's going to be very hard to come by when you're talking about a 7-year-old child versus, that's something you normally see in, when you're looking at an assault of, maybe someone's wife or something, when you walk in on someone cheating on you or something like that. So that's kind of that more of a mitigating. I don't think you're going to have that here. I don't think that there's anything that a 7-year-old could have said to her that would warrant a reaction like this that any reasonable juror would find is worthy of a mitigation.
Yeah, and I mean, she's just so much bigger than the 7-year-old as well. Yeah. I mean, age, size, all of it. For the dad, I think a lot of us on the outside, like I said, you just see this guy and you're like, what are you doing? And you can think of every bad word in the book to describe him as a person if all of this is true. Inside of a courtroom, I feel like we've seen in some of these cases, someone might say that they were the victim of domestic abuse because of their partner. I mean, what does his defense look like where, he's really saying he saw it, he allowed it, but it was out of fear. He was concerned about his children. Again, to the public, I don't think anybody's buying it, but in a courtroom, if you're building up a defense, what does that look like for this dad?
And you have seen that. I alluded to the boy that was locked in a room. I think it was they built a room out in his basement. And the father was charged, and now the wife is also facing charges. And I often think, and having handled a lot of domestic cases that involve DV, that you do see the abuse isn't just isolated normally, so people that abuse. And so, and men can be abused, make no doubt about it, and that is not uncommon either. And so that is something that I think that he has a shot at, in terms of he himself, but that just goes to mitigation. It doesn't go to exoneration. And you're not going to get a jury nullification on anything like that by any stretch of the imagination, particularly when you're talking about such a small child involved. The arguments can be made whether or not a jury believes it or not. It all depends upon him and how he presents, and he would have to testify for that sort of defense to work.
Yeah, and we'll see where this case goes from here. I mean, again, it could take a turn to being even more heartbreaking if we're talking about a murder case. Yeah. So we'll see what happens next out of Indiana. Krista Ramey, trial attorney, it's always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for helping break this one down for us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.